just remember one thing, and that stuck with me. You have to fight in your own armor. The first step is actually being a person worth being followed.
And why they wanted to work with us is because they were actually looking for self-development. They were looking for mentorship.
Welcome to Get Your House in Order, where the Medici brothers, investors and entrepreneurs, Cris Auditore and Dr. Philip Zimmermann, discuss timeless principles of success, significance and legacy. A podcast for business owners who want to design a beautiful life and a beautiful business. Sponsored by the one and only exclusive Medici community.
Welcome back to Get Your House in Order, where we talk about how to make your life and your business more beautiful. Today with a special guest, whereby special I would say I could not find somebody better, but Cris Auditore Zimmermann is in the house. So Cris, welcome.
This is brother they love at the beginning.
Yes, he was the cheapest option I could find. I'm sorry, but I'm happy to talk to you today, Cris. So the topic today is the silent business multiplier you're probably ignoring. Cris, what is the silent business multiplier in a business?
The development of the staff and your employees, I think it's one of the most overlooked things that business owners, they are so driven on the kind of the success of their products and sales that they forget to really develop the people. They focus in on the products and not as much on the people. And I can't tell you how much I think that the culture you create within a company, amongst your employees, how much that actually determines your success. Not as much the products, but the people.
Yeah, I mean, Peter Drucker famously said that culture eats strategy for breakfast. Sometimes we are so focused on creating the strategy we want to execute in our business, which I got my doctorate in strategic leadership, so I'm all about strategy and I believe it is vitally important. But as soon as you have a larger team, the culture actually eats strategy for breakfast. You know, what's hanging on the wall is not happening down the hall. And sometimes, especially when you move up, you are not in touch, so to speak, with your business, with your people, and that can create a big problem. So developing your staff, developing the people you are hiring, Cris. So I remember 20 years ago, and I brought it with me because I almost have it with me every day since 20 years. I wrote 10 things down, which are basically goals for my life, and it was laminated. So if something is laminated, it's almost like the 10 Commandments, you know, for me. So if I were Moses, you know, I would have laminated these 10 Commandments when I came down from the mountain. But I wrote down 10 goals that I kind of remind myself. I don't know where I got it from. I saw some back there. Back then there was no YouTube, but some kind of VCR tape that I listened to, that you have to write down your goals. And one of the goals, the last one, is actually develop leaders who do greater things than I will ever do. I don't know why this is so deep in kind of my goals, but it was when I was 20, when I have not created anything. I already had that vision and that drive, and know that when I really invest and develop people, the return it even gives to me, not just for my business, is just is something that is so wonderful that you can't even put in words. And so there are so many people who late in life, after they have achieved great success, they go like, oh, now I want to mentor. But this idea is actually you do it while you're already in the game. So Cris, talk a little bit more about taking people that you hired that are on your staff, and how do you develop them, and how do you actually mentor them as part of doing their daily job?
First of all, I would say that a lot of business owners really don't think through this topic well enough, because we are entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs have not gone through the classical training oftentimes. You know, a lot of entrepreneurs have dropped out of school or never went to university. They just wanted to create companies and make money and be successful. So they have not, in a sense, risen through the ranks of a corporate life, a corporate training. And we know there are lots of programs out there how to, you know, take people through leadership developments. Now, a lot of entrepreneurs I meet have not done that just because they are outside of that circle. So for them, it's almost foreign to be, you know, dedicating intentional time towards that. And so the first thing I would say is, if you're a business owner, if you're an entrepreneur, leadership development within your organization is absolutely crucial for determining your success in business. Now, you know, if you have a small setup, you know, just a couple of people, you know, 10 people, 20 people on staff, you know, you may not see this as vital. But once you start working really more through people and through other leaders, oh man, it is basically the number one thing you need to be working on. What is the leadership development within your organization? And, you know, it kind of starts with laying out your own principles. So I love, you know, that you laminated your own goals and things that are important to you. You need to do that for yourself and for your organization. You need to pin things down. This is what we stand for. This is what we value. And you just mentioned, you know, it's not just by having a nice mission statement somewhere on the wall, but it's really kind of what is core to what you want to see happening within the organization, and then you train on that. You train it, you repeat it, and you reward it. So it's also about creating some financial incentives. If people perform according to what you have laid out as the owner of the business, then you actually, you know, you incentivize it that this is being executed.
So there's a book that I read early on from Ken Blanchard. I think it's called The 1 Minute Manager. I'm not sure if the title is 100% correct, but the idea is that you give immediate feedback. And that also translates to having a small staff, because I see this really not actually been executed as well as it should. So a 1 minute manager, kind of Blanchard, I think, talks about that immediately in that 1 minute you give feedback. You either praise something so you give feedback in the sense like, this was good, this is a good behavior, this was a good task. So you really elevate people. We sometimes forget, especially as entrepreneurs, most people are insecure. Most of the people in this world, if not all, are insecure. And when we see something as the leader, as the boss, as the business owner that is praiseworthy, we need to call it out. And we need to call it out not just in a one-on-one, but amongst the team, because people rise up, they feel valued, they feel seen. So very important. But at the same time, you also need to give direct feedback if there is something that you do not like. Sometimes people think that, oh, once a quarter we have a quarterly review, or once a year we do a review session about how you're doing and how I'm doing. And that is a big problem in building culture, because you have to start to give immediate feedback so that people kind of know. So when I hire somebody who is a direct report to me, I tell them, you will always know what I think about you. Now, this might not be the best news, because sometimes this will mean I will give you immediate feedback. I will not, go pregnant with criticism that I know that I will put on a list, and in 3 months I will talk to you about this. I will immediately give you basically a feedback, and that's how you build culture.
Well, and that's actually a great example, because we've all heard about and perhaps experienced toxic cultures, and I would define a toxic culture is where people don't know what are the intentions, what are the goals, and what are the values. Which sounds superficially, just like, a little bit of a sloppy organization. I would actually say that this is the birth ground of a toxic culture if people left in the open, and they don't know what the guidelines are, they don't know what are the standards, what are the principles, and that's actually what we have to create as leaders. So in many ways, we talk often about not so much working in the business but on the business. Well, because in the business you can hire people to work in the business, but who works on the business? And so your job as the owner of the company is really to design the environment, design the culture, and it starts by laying out how do you want things to happen? How do you want to see things done?
Yeah, and that's kind of really this idea that we are not the builder, but that we are actually the architect. We are the designer of our business. But so often we are so busy, so crazy busy about running the operations that we really have to pull out. Because if we don't have the time to really work on the business, rather than in the business the whole time, nobody will work on the business, as you say. Now, as you said. Now, I remember how my daughter, when she was around 1.5, so she couldn't talk as much yet as she's now talking, but she wanted to explain something to me. I was busy on my cell phone doing something very important, I imagine, and she came to me and kind of wanted to tell me something, and I did not understand what she was saying. I kind of figure it out as a dad. You kind of figure out what they actually want to communicate. But as she was continuing playing, I paused for a second, and the idea came to me that one day I will actually understand everything she will tell me. And then the next thought was, will I actually be the person she wants to talk to? Am I actually, in that case, the father, but if we translate it to business, am I actually the leader my employees want to talk to? They want to follow. Have we earned the trust? So when we talk about mentoring, the first step is actually being a person worth being followed. Are you the leader? Have you grown enough? And that doesn't mean perfection, but it means that you actually are somebody that when they look up to you, they're like, I wanna be mentored by you. I wanna grow. I wanna be developed by you.
Now, a lot of staff that we've hired over the years, Philip, I think one reason why they joined our team and why they wanted to work with us is because they were actually looking for self-development. They were looking for mentorship. And it wasn't because we offered them the greatest salary or the greatest job description. It was really more wanting to be close with people that are, developing themselves, the companies, and being close to that. And so I think this is something we undervalue as in the business world. We think it is about the money. We think it's about the compensation. Where obviously money is important and a nice salary is important. But, quite honestly, we have all read the statistics. Above a certain pay grade, people, whether you have another 1,000, 2,000 on your bank account, doesn't really make a big difference per month. But what really matters is, are you part of an environment that is growing, developing, and flourishing? And so I think actually it's almost like a secret weapon that we have in our arsenal as leaders, is that if we create the culture, if we create the environment, then people want to work in this environment and they're willing to go the extra mile. I know so many who are so frustrated about their workers only working 9 to 5 and no overtime. If I think of our employees that we've had over the years, they've always gone overtime. They've always gone the extra mile, and it wasn't just because we gave them extra money for the overtime, but it was really because they wanted to serve. They wanted to make a difference. They wanted to add value to what we're creating together here. So I just think it has a huge payback, so to speak, beyond just the financial reward.
Well, and also the kind of we talk a lot of times about the legacy we are creating. I mean, if you really have taken somebody and invested yourself and poured yourself into them, and also that means that we have hired some people where we know we could have hired different talent, but we hired them and we developed the talent as they were working with us, and they will be grateful, and we could call them up at any moment and they would still kind of do whatever we would ask them, not because they have to, but because they want to, because we actually earned the right to do that because we invested ourselves into them.
So one of the big problems I actually see is that people put way too much weight on the CV when they hire a person. If you get an HR a company to help you kind of on the human resource side to hire new personnel, they always look through the CVs and kind of the which university they attended, which grades that they have, and that kind of stuff. To be very honest, I freaking don't care much about CVs. I wanna have an interview with a person. I wanna know what they've already done. I wanna hear the story. I perhaps want to call up their former employees and kind of have a chat around that. But employers. But it's really for me more the hunger and the willingness to develop and the teachability of the person that I'm looking for a lot more than the credentials, because I believe that this is just a whole lot more important.
Yeah. So we've talked about how kind of we mentor people that are part of our staff, but let's talk about a little bit about people that mentored us. What are some lessons we've learned from our mentors? Because of course, everything positive that maybe comes out is a result of us, of somebody investing into us, either through books, either through workshops, seminars, courses. We are very high on self-development and really learning and growing. But there were also some individuals who really poured their lives into us. Cris, what are some lessons that you've learned from your mentors?
Well, I remember one of the lessons was when I started working in Africa. After high school, I immediately left Germany. I wanted to have some African experience and go and have some adventure. And it was my uncle who was running a big construction project in Nairobi, Kenya, and he kind of put me in charge of that project. And I had no idea what I was doing, and he was my mentor. From the distance, he was in South Africa, I was in Nairobi, Kenya, and he coached me over the phone. Sometimes he would fly up and give me some lessons. And so I definitely consider him to be my first real business mentor. And one of the things that he always kind of said when he showed up, after a few weeks of me just doing the work, he always said, "Cris, work hard, play hard." And so here's what this meant. He expected, in many ways, for me to really take charge of the project. This was an important project. It involved about 150 workers. It involved a lot of money. It was on a tight budget. So he expected for me to work hard, which I did. I put in all my energy, all my effort. But then when he showed up and we spent a few days together, he always made sure that we did something fun together. And in Africa, that meant, he would literally get some small airplanes to take us out into the bush of Africa, go to the Masai Mara, go to Zanzibar. We took a trip to Zanzibar. We went fishing on Lake Victoria. And kind of the lesson was, yes, we work hard, we sweat hard, but then we also, enjoy life. And I think this is actually one of the reasons why I've stayed away from burnout and kind of stressed out over the course of my business life, is that I've always felt like, yes, we work hard, but then also on the weekends, on vacation, we also relax hard, which means we spend money on doing good things that bring joy to our lives.
Yeah, some people turn that around, and maybe that's the problem. They play hard and then they want to work hard, but there's not a lot of energy to then work hard. So it really is you have to work hard, and then the playing is also much more rewarding. When you've given it all. We know that from sport, when we really have given everything, the reward afterwards, it never feels nice in the beginning, but then afterwards just it feels very nice. Well, I remember a time when I was actually in a very difficult spot one of our organizations and overseeing it, and I felt so much pressure from so many directions, and it was almost like a dark cloud over me. That at some points it really was that I had to every 2 or 3 hours leave my desk and go outside just to breathe, because I the pressure was so on, and I know, because business owners are listening, they can relate to that. We don't often talk about it, but there was a time when I really felt like, wow, one more day, 1 more hour, let's go. The pressure was on. And I had a mentor who sat down with me, and he looked at me and said, Philip, I understand and I sympathize with you for what you're going through, but this too shall pass. That were his words. This too shall pass. And sometimes these words alone kind of it kept me going through some very dark times to realize, you know what, this too shall pass. And then later, a few years ago, I read something or heard something from Dan Sullivan, who said that, you know, he has this question: if this doesn't bother you, if this would not bother you, what would you do? So in a moment where there is darkness, where you are frustrated, where you don't know how to continue, to ask this question now: if this would not bother me emotionally, if I would not be stuck here, if I wouldn't maybe not be angry, if maybe an employee does something and I'm just furious, if this would not bother me, what would I do? And that turns immediately your mind into action mode and into problem solving mode, and that actually takes you into a different state of how you can deal with it, because we can sometimes get stuck in that emotional piece.
Well, one other lesson that I remember from my uncle was later on. I was back in Germany, and I was facing a very difficult decision. I was serving on a board back then, and there was a conflict that kind of showed up on that board, and there was a guy that just, you know, in a sense was giving me a pain and giving me hell. And I remember getting on a phone call with my uncle, and I probably for 15-20 minutes, I just told him that, you know, how this makes me feel, and how this is terrible, and, you know, that I'm trying to kind of work this out. And I remember that the following words, which, you know, they have stuck with me. He said, Chris, you know, after I've been complaining for all these moments, he said, Chris, perhaps the guy's just an asshole. And it felt incredibly liberating, because in my mind I was rationalizing, why is he behaving like that? Why is this all coming? And he was like, Chris, some people are just assholes. And and so this brought great relief to me, and I've actually kept that. You know, sometimes, you know, we try to rationalize other people's behaviors, and sometimes some people are just irrational, or they just behave stupid,
yeah.
and they just cause unnecessary pain and grief, and so you to even have that category where we say, you know what, I'm just gonna, you know, box it away and say, you know, this is actually an idiot, and perhaps I should just, you know, get rid of him, or get rid of, you know, dealing with that person. I mean, I was just the other day talking with a friend of mine, and we were having a good time talking about all the people that we blocked on our phones. And I don't know how many, but but I have a whole bunch of people that I've literally canceled out of my life, that I've blocked away, because I just don't want to be associated with them. I just think they're idiots. I just don't think they have space in my life. And so one of the things that I've learned is that there are people I want to deal with, there are people I have to deal with, and then there are people that I just need to get rid of in order to move on and just keep developing. And so I felt this is a great liberation for me to understand that.
Just a small disclaimer is if everyone is an asshole or an idiot, you know, you might be the idiot or the asshole, okay? That's the kind of the old Peter principle. If Peter has a problem with Jazz, if Peter has a problem with Tom, if Peter has a problem with Jonah, Peter might be the problem here, you know. So that,
well, and I confess, I've been the asshole in some situations.
You are blocked. you are blocked on some on some.
I'm probably
phones,
blocked on some other phones as well.
Yeah,
it's fine.
Well.
It's fine.
Well,
it's
one
okay.
of our both of our mentors is our grandfather.
Yes.
He lived a life of adventure. He grew up during the World War II, and then right after, when he was 17, 18 years, he went to South Africa to actually work in the mines, and no jobs in Germany, everything. He's from Nuremberg, which was destroyed completely, and so he left to start a new life. Then in Africa, that's where he found his wife, and our aunt and our mother was born in South Africa. They came back for a few years to Germany, but then they moved back to Africa. So most of our childhood, we only saw them in the summers. We spent most of our summers in South Africa. But I remember that then, and when he was then retired later on, I mean, he oversaw hundreds of thousands of employees over his basically his time. And so I often would go to him and ask him, a leadership advice. And so early on, I still remember, he always had time when I would say, can I come by in an hour? He would say, yes, come by, and we would sit down, and Granny would get us some cookies and some drinks, and then Granny would leave, and then we would have the talk. He always in his study, and I remember he told me how at some point he said, Philip, because I was kind of trying to find my way as a leader. How do I behave? All of these things I was reading, and he said, Philip, just remember one thing, and that stuck with me. You have to fight in your own armor. You have to fight in your own armor. You have certain gifts, you have a certain personality, you have certain traits that are unique to you, and you need to make sure that you know how to actually fight with your armor, within your armor. And you can give a little bit backstory to where that actually comes from. But for me, this meant that I want to become the best person to fight with the weapons that I have available for me through my personality. I don't have to be like somebody else. I just have to be the best version of who I am. And that was a great relief. And at the same time, it gave me drive to improve, to become better in who I really was.
Well, in the book that I wrote, Get Your House in Order, there's this principle, the house rule, choose your Donatello, which is really where Cosimo de' Medici chose an artist, Donatello, that he mentored, where he became the great patron. And of course, the statue that Donatello created was the statue of David. Which is the biblical story of David fighting against Goliath. And I think this is where this advice comes from that you just mentioned, fight in your own armor. Because if you know the story of David, he was facing the big giant Goliath, but he didn't face him, with a big armor, with a big shield, with a big sword. But he kind of came as this shepherd boy, kind of with his slingshot. And so I think it's quite a, if you go to Florence, Italy, you see all these Davids in the city of Florence, because it was kind of the symbol for the city. We're fighting in our own armor against the big Goliaths all around. I think this is a great lesson for business leaders. Specifically when you're young and starting off in business, you have all these great heroes. You read about Jeff Bezos, read about Richard Branson, you hear stories about Elon Musk, and you try to kind of be one of these guys and kind of study them. How did they become successful? And it can be quite intimidating. And you try to behave where it actually doesn't fit your personality, where it doesn't fit your gifting. And so I think this is actually a wonderful, liberating advice. Again, it's funny how we all, in a sense, we always need things from our mentors to liberate us. As we're kind of having this conversation here today, I'm like, good mentorship liberates you. It kind of allows you to to do certain things. It kind of sets you free to leave certain things behind or move on. And so I think this is what great mentorship actually does. So I think this whole theme of liberation. And so fighting in your own armor, that's a great liberation for your own personality. You don't have to be someone else in order to be successful. You can create your own unique way as a business leader.
Yeah. Well, great conversation, and maybe as a takeaway for anybody who's listening, think of lessons that you've learned from mentors, and maybe write them down. And maybe you want to take some time to talk to your kids, or talk to your employees, or talk to your spouse or partner, to say, you know what, whenever you kind of think about a lesson and you actually share it with somebody, you are actually creating value. At the same time, you're reminding yourself of that lesson, and really being part of that transformation process. If you want to get the book, Get Your House in Order, just go to medicibook.com. You can get it and download it there for free. Otherwise, happy if you subscribe to the podcast, and we'll see and hear you in the next episode. Thank you.